Well, Mark, it has been a busy week when it comes to executive orders. Let's get the lay of the land with what we're looking at here. We're talking about birthright citizenship, and we are talking about restrictions on mail-in voting.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about the timeline there is just this week we have the executive order restricting mail-in voting. What we also have this week are the Supreme Court oral arguments about President Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship. The reason that's interesting is that he issued that executive order the first day of his second term back in office. So that's how slowly the wheels of justice grind.
President Trump campaigned on this idea of ending birthright citizenship. Constitutional scholars everywhere were like, you just can't do that. That didn't stop him from issuing the executive order. What does the actual Constitution say about who's a citizen and who isn't?
If you were born here and you're subject to the jurisdiction, meaning the laws of our land, you are a citizen. So there are a lot of Supreme Court cases where the justices have to think, okay, well, what would the founders do if they were alive today? What's the spirit of the Constitution? Is this a living document? That's not going on here. None of that is here. It's very rare to have a constitutional case that is actually so easy, where it's just like, all we really have to do here is read the document, read the Constitution. It's not that long, so it's an easy call.
In your esteemed legal opinion, why would the president want to end birthright citizenship?
I'm not sure that a legal opinion is going to give the answer to that. I don't want to speculate on motives. I do think that I don't want to speculate on motives. Obviously he has a point of view on immigration.
Very diplomatic there. I'll speculate because okay. I think it has been very clear that the president and the people who voted for him, have a lot of issues with immigration, and the idea of anchor babies gets floated out there. Not really a big problem that we've dealt with, but it feels like this is one of those deals that he was able to kind of whip voters into a frenzy about, and it didn't take him long, day one to issue this. Is this going to be a slam dunk when it gets in front of the justices? Are we talking a 9-0, 8-1 level vote?
So the oral arguments are today. I haven't listened to them yet. That gives us a lot of good insight. I'll post on that after I listen to them. But that's usually sort of the justices tipping their hand about what they're going to do. I think that we've got 3 liberal justices who would never vote to uphold Trump's executive order on this issue. I think we've got 3 justices who are extremely unlikely to go against the president on this issue, despite the constitutional clarity. And then I think we've got 3 justices who are conservative, but I believe are still likely to strike down the executive order with their votes. That's Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Barrett. So I would predict it's going to be a 6-3 decision in favor of striking down the executive order, but I reserve the right to change that prediction after I hear the arguments.
Well, have we seen any historical cases that give us some kind of precedent over, how the court might rule?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. So we've got this Wong Kim Ark case from 1898. That's the last time we substantively dealt with this issue. And that was about the enforcement of something called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was trying to prevent any new Chinese people from coming here or from Chinese people who were already here becoming citizens. And it was enforced against the guy who was trying to re-enter the country, but he was born here. And the Supreme Court, in a 7-2 decision at the time, said, this is a nothing burger. He was born here. He's a citizen. His parents were, the talking point you'll hear is, but his parents were here legally. Well, there really wasn't a legal concept of illegal immigration before the Chinese Exclusion Act. So in some sense, everybody was here, quote unquote, legally, but that isn't what the decision hinged on anyway. The idea is that they were not just on vacation. I mean, they were living here and they had the intent to remain indefinitely. That was some of the important language in that case. And this, the same is true here. So what the president and his allies want to do with this executive order is say that the key language in the Constitution is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So the Constitution says if you're born here and you're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, you're a citizen. And the president and his allies want to say, well, if you're here illegally, you're not subject to the jurisdiction of our land. And we're not just talking about being subject to the laws. We're talking about this sort of amorphous concept of political jurisdiction, where it's like you're consenting to the laws of the United States. A few things are wrong with that. The first is, if you're here illegally, you are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States of America. If you commit a crime, or some would say another crime, while you're here, you're going to get arrested. In fact, that's why we have the data out of Texas, which collected the information on homicide rates and arrest rates among undocumented immigrants and found that their crime rates are lower than U.S.-born citizens. So they're subject to the laws of our jurisdiction. The other problem with it is that the president is using the arguments from literally the dissent in the Wong Kim Ark case. So they went back to 1898. They found a 7-2 decision, and they said, we're going to rely on the arguments of the two in the minority in that decision and hope that it carries the day in 2026. So we'll see.
You brought up that statistics that's been quoted a lot when it comes to, immigrants here in the United States committing crimes at a lower rate than American citizens. We have the narrative that, they're sending the worst of the worst and that they're all criminals, et cetera. But it doesn't seem like the numbers at all bear that out.
That's right. I mean, put yourself in their shoes, right? Okay, couple things. If you were in a country where you could not provide for your family, what would you do? Even if you thought it was illegal to go to another country, to find a better life for your family, you're going to do what you need to do to find the better life for your family if you feel like it's your only option. I think that is just the honest truth for most people. And then when you get there, you're going to want to stay there. And the greatest thing you could do to jeopardize your chances in America and your family's chances in America, which you have risked life and limb to achieve, is commit a crime, go into the system. The old way of doing it is, and this is why President Obama was sort of called derisively the exporter-in-chief, is because they had a policy is if you're undocumented and you get arrested, they call up immigration enforcement to ship you out. So you're not going to want to, if putting yourself in their shoes, there's a lot of incentive, there's extra incentive not to commit a crime.
Is birthright citizenship, people coming over here to have, anchor babies, is that really a problem that you've ever heard about, statistically speaking?
Well, the talking point that I hear in my comment section is people talking about Chinese billionaires on vacation, come in, have a baby, then that baby has U.S. citizenship. We don't have documented cases that I know of that, but it's also irrelevant to the president's executive order. I think it would be a more interesting case if the president said, I'm going to issue an executive order against vacation birthright citizenship. And I'm going to say specifically, you have to have an intent to remain here indefinitely. But that's not what the executive order said. It was super broad. It includes anybody who's not a citizen or a green card holder. So if you're here on a student visa or you're a refugee, you're seeking asylum, and you're in the process of applying for lawful permanent residence, obviously you have an intent to reside here indefinitely. But but sort of the boogeyman we're talking about is this idea of vacation anchor babyism. But let's talk about an example of what they're calling an anchor baby. Okay, the child of somebody who, two parents who were here on student visas and were not yet green card holders. She was born in Oregon about 55 years ago. Her parents were here on student visas, not yet green card holders. She became a citizen because of the 14th Amendment's clear language on birthright citizenship. But if President Trump's executive order were in place, she would not have been a citizen. She grew up, she went to Berkeley, then Yale, then became a public defender, then worked for the ACLU, then became its legal director, and is now arguing the case for birthright citizenship in the Supreme Court today. So I don't believe the fallacy that what you might call an anchor baby means someone who's not going to contribute to the community and society and make us a stronger nation.
That's subject to the laws and the jurisdictions thereof. Does that cover diplomats' kids? If you're over here as a diplomat and you have a kid?
That's exactly right. So it's very clear that that's what they're talking about. You never want to have superfluous language in a statute or in the Constitution. Courts want every word to have meaning. So the question becomes, what does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean? It's got to mean something. And you're exactly right. Diplomats' kids. So diplomats are not subject to our jurisdiction. That's why they can park anywhere. And so if you're a diplomat and you're over here and you have a baby, that baby is not a U.S. citizen under the Constitution. That's who that language applies to.
Yeah. I know your time is precious today. I want to get to the mail-in voting restrictions and that executive order that the president issued yesterday. It seems like President Trump really has a big issue with people voting by mail, despite the fact that he just did it himself.
That's right. He's done it before, repeatedly. I mean, he clearly, if you look at not what he says, but what he does, he has a lot of confidence in the mail-in voting system. So the executive order today, it has the feds create a citizenship list. It requires barcodes on mail-in ballots, even though we already have electronic tracking in most states, or at least in my state, in Colorado, I should say, and in several others that do mail-in balloting. It requires the states to give their mail-in ballot list to the U.S. Postal Service 60 days in advance of the election, even though many states allow you to request a mail-in ballot or even register within 60 days of the election. And it prioritizes criminal prosecutions for state election officials and withholding funds to states that don't run the elections in the way that the president wants. There's a huge constitutional issue here, too. So the Constitution...
I mean, this seems like yet another case where this order directly defies the constitutional requirement that gives the states the right to run their own elections.
Yeah, so that is a nuanced provision. I actually have it here right in front of me. In both birthright citizenship and in just the general idea of states running elections, we have pretty clear constitutional language. But what we also have is the idea that to the extent that the feds are going to get involved at all, it's got to be Congress, not the president. So Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution says that the time, places, and manner of holding elections for the senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But then it goes on to say the Congress may at any time make a law to alter such regulations. So in other words, the Constitution says that states run elections. But if there's a good reason, Congress can stick its nose in. Alexander Hamilton wanted this to prevent states from just saying, no, we're not going to have a federal election this year, right? So there is a method for the federal government to get involved, but that method is through Congress. We've got to pass a law about it. It can't just be a stroke of the pen from the president.
And he's pushed executive orders like this before that would place some restrictions, and those have not fared well, right?
That's right. I mean, there's a wonderful chart on the Brennan Center for Justice's website of all the litigation they have going about his last executive order to attempt to regulate voting. It's just loss after loss after loss after loss, not only because the substance of what he's doing violates the Constitution, but also a big part of constitutional law is who decides. And in these cases, it's Congress, not the president. Now, even though he has all these losses stacking up, he's playing bully ball. You know, he's got smart people working for him who knows who know that this violates the Constitution, right? They do an amazing job of coming up with an argument in support of their actions anyway, but I think in their heart of hearts, they know that these are losing cases. And so there's sort of a larger strategy at play of, okay, we're going to lose in court, but how long is that going to take? And how much chaos can we cause to elections between now and then? How much confusion and discouragement can we place in the hearts and minds of voters as we approach the midterms while many of these cases may still be pending?
I mean, it feels like you hit the nail on the head there, that he may lose in court, but in the court of public opinion, there are certainly people who think, yeah, mail-in voting is totally insecure, because I think in their mind, they just imagine your mail getting stolen and somebody taking it, not understanding the tracking that goes on, but B, how unbelievably rare mail-in voting fraud actually is.
So there actually was a study that found that mail-in voting fraud is less common than being struck by lightning. And I love that statistic, but I also got to tell you that I had a guy in my comment section say, well, I have been struck by lightning and I'm against mail-in voting. So,
he's allowed to be, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. He can have that one. I'm glad he's okay, but he might have missed the point.
What if you got struck by lightning while you were committing fraud as you were mail-in voting?
Then buy your lottery ticket. Yeah.
Okay. Man, a lot of stuff before the court and before the court of public opinion. I appreciate your insight, Mark. And we'll see what the Supreme Court has to say. You know what? There will be lawsuits.
There will be. Yeah, they're keeping the lawyers in business. Thank you, President Trump.